Hello, everyone. My name is Danny Kiesler, and I first want to thank everyone for joining me. I've asked a few of my colleagues to join in today's lecture, but I'd like to thank the American Viola Society, and I'd like to welcome all the participants who are listening to my video now as well. I appreciate your interest and your support. So thank you very much. So again, welcome to my living room. This is in Bangkok, Thailand. This is my home. Welcome to my home, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about the German composer and violinist Johannes Palaschko. And like many of you, the first time I heard of Palaschko was in a viola studio in school, in college. One of my friends was playing some Palaschko etudes, and that's kind of where I was introduced to it. And didn't think much of it at the time. And then years later, after I graduated school, I started playing some of these Palaschko etudes. There's a lot of them on IMSLP. So, I was playing through some of them, and I felt like I got to know the composer, at least musically. That is, Palaschko has a funny sense of humor in his music, and he's got some clever ideas in there sometimes. And I saw that, and I thought it was musically interesting, especially for an etude. And so that's kind of why I started this whole thing, So I have a PowerPoint presentation prepared. So I'm going to try to go back and forth so you're not just constantly looking at my PowerPoint, but let's start. Just give me one moment. All right. So I'm calling the lecture a biography reloaded. So it's trying to re-examine and rethink about the biography of Johannes Palaschko. So today I'm going to be talking about, first of all, kind of why I'm doing this, and then getting more into the research part of it. I'm going to compare the three biographies that exist right now. I'm going to verify some of those things with some historical documents that I found. And then I'm going to show you all the other things that I found out about Palaschko in my research on this topic. So yeah, why am I doing this, and why did this happen? I guess is a pretty good question. So I wrote a paper a few years ago about Palaschko's etudes that I call Palaschko versus Mahler. And basically the concept here is to take Palaschko etudes of a variety of levels, beginning, middle, and advanced players, and pair them with an orchestral excerpt or with a solo sonata or a concerto or a student piece. And that's basically the gist of the paper, using Palaschko etudes to help with your playing, specific playing in certain pieces. And in that paper, I tried to do a biography. And when I started doing the biography, I realized there's not that much out there on this guy. There is a Facebook group that they play, and talk about playing and practicing the Palaschko etudes. And then there's also a Wikipedia page, which is basically where I started my biography, of this composer. And in this Palaschko versus Mahler, I basically kind of analyze the Wikipedia article and try to get to some of the sources in the bibliography. And didn't really uncover much, but I didn't spend that much time on it. The majority of the paper was the etudes. So then, a year or two later, I decided I was going to do something with the Palaschko stuff. And I was looking at this paper again and deciding, well, this biography, is not much. So I was initially started saying, okay, I'm going to look for 2 weeks to vamp up, the biography to make it better. And it ended up turning into several months of research, and ended up finding quite a few little things about Palaschko. And it was approaching quite a few things that maybe about 100 little things I found about Palaschko, looking in various places. And then trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this, because I don't write biographies, I'm just a violist. So I came up with this idea to first, kind of examine the current biographies that are out there and see if I could prove them with some documents. And then see, with all this other stuff that I found, how could I put that into like a story. And what I did is, the reloaded part is to take these little these little things I found, and assemble them chronologically, and then let the reader infer how that might have impacted Palaschko's life. And I should say this, all the stuff that I found was just during his life. I didn't do anything after his life, or any of the research after his life. So all the things that you'll be seeing today were from the composer's lifetime, which is 1877 to 1932. So I'm trying to reload all of these little facts, into a story. Okay, so let's start at the beginning of where I was at, with the Palaschko biography. Okay, it starts with the German music, lexicon by Muller. And I think I got this actually from the Wikipedia page, but then there's actually the whole book. You can download it and view it. This was the whole entry. Basically, this first one is just about his life, and I'm going to go into a little bit of details when I get into the comparison. All of this stuff was in the Wikipedia page, and I'm going to talk about all of it, so I'm not going to. And then the rest were the works as of the year this book was published, which I think was 1929. So Palaschko was not quite dead yet. So it's not a complete list of works. Then the Ryman music dictionary as well. There's several years. This is 1929, but I think the Palaschko entry is in the 1959 edition. And this again looks very similar to the Wikipedia page as well. I'm going to look at these in more depth in a second. And then the last one is from the Joachim website, and it has an extensive biography of the violinist, and it also has a biography of all of his students. So he had many, many, many students. And if you go and look through all of these students, it really gives you a snapshot into the world of his world at that time. So if we look a little bit more in detail into these biographies, we can see that there's, they don't necessarily agree with each other. These are the three biographies. Now, in the first one, if we go back, this second, it says his name, and then that he was the music director and he was a composer. And then this says his birthday is July 13th, 1879, and born in Berlin. Now, if we look at the other two, they say 1877. So we already don't kind of agree on what year he was born. If we go back, then the next thing that it says is he studied, this was the school that he studied, Fuchs Lyceum, before college. But then it says he was a music student from 1895 to 1899, and he studied at the Berlin Conservatory. And these are his teachers. From 1899 to 1913, it says he was in, this means Concertreisen, which I think is like concert tours or something like maybe a freelance musician. And then from 1913, he was the director of this Britisher Conservatory in Berlin, and he married Martha Jürgens. And then the list of works. So in the Ryman, it says basically the same thing, with the exception that it says he was a violinist of the Berkshire Conservatory. It doesn't name him the director. So we're not really agreeing on the job in this one either. And then this last one, there's really no, I'm just not sure if this is something esoteric, but just the spelling of this conservatory is different. And I've seen this spelled differently on different websites from the original. So yeah, not much information, but they're slightly different. So basically the first place I started with all of this was to find out when he was born and what I could uncover about that. So basically what I did was look through old birth registry books that you can look at online of Berlin at that time. And the registry books, they don't have the birth certificate, so you don't see who the mother and father is or anything like that, but it just registers that that person was born on that day at that year. And I was able to find the one on Palaschko after looking maybe 1 or 2 days. It took a long time. There's many, many books to go through. And it did confirm that the book was 1877. So that's the confirmed date. And I also found his death date, which was no controversy there. But as I was looking through all of these books, I realized that there's not very many Palaschkos in Berlin at that time. There were some other like Peisch. There was one that I saw. There was similar ones, but nothing like Palaschko. So, and I even went back to what I thought the previous generation, to Johannes Palaschko, to try to find his dad, and couldn't find that name either in the older ones. So maybe have to do more research to find out who the parents were. I couldn't find out who his family was, and I didn't find out about what school he went to before this Fuchs Lyceum. I couldn't find any information about it. So his violin teacher was trying to find some connection between Joachim and Palaschko, other than what the biography said. And this was actually on what this picture here, sorry, is of the Jubileum Orchestra for the occasion to commemorate the violinist Joachim. And so all of the violinists were students, former students of Joachim, and the whole concert was to commemorate the life of him. And you know, Palaschko wasn't of the last generation to study with him, but he was older at that time when Palaschko was studying with him. And they had many concerts like this for him. Joachim. So in this picture is Palaschko, but let me see. Yeah, in this picture of that is Palaschko. He's in there somewhere, I'm assuming, but I couldn't find a picture of the composer, unfortunately, either. So that's, yeah, but he's in there somewhere, I think. And this is actually the list of all the musicians who played in that concert, and Palaschko is on there. So there is some kind of connection other than the biography. This is something else I found along the way. There's a library, the Slub Library in Dresden, has their card catalog available. And this is the original manuscript of this Opus 9, which really wasn't on any of the lists, I don't think, from IMSLP or Wikipedia. But this Opus 9, it's an orchestra piece, an overture. And in it, he dedicates it to Joachim. And it says that it was performed in the Royal College of Music in Berlin in 1898, his senior year, I guess, or his last year of school. I'm not sure what they call it, but some early successes. Yeah, so Taubert was his theory teacher. And as I was doing the research on this, you see his name pop up quite a bit. He was a composer and a theorist, you know, and a little bit of a critic, music critic. He was teaching at the Berlin Conservatory, and then eventually went to the Stern Conservatory and taught music theory. Yeah, he's frequently mentioned in music journals. This thing on the bottom right here is something from Die Musik, which is a music journal of that era. And Die Musik, there's several sources that I'm using through this. Die Musik is one, Signalis, another one. The Musical Times is another one. And Musical Times music journal still publishes, but the other two do not. So yeah, and this particular is talking about his 88th birthday and a party that's going to a concert and party for Taubert. So quite a famous person in his day. Yeah, there was a relationship outside of the biography between Taubert and Palaschko in a piece that Taubert was writing, this piece, Stanchen. Palaschko was the editor. He used that as the editor, and he's given credit on the music as the editor of this piece. And at the time that the piece was written, it said this. It was mentioned in Musikalische, which is another music journal, a German music journal of the day. And in 1905, Palaschko technically didn't have a job yet. He was just finished school, and so you know, his teacher used him as an editor for his work. And he had just finished school, you know, so what does that say about their relationship? You know, that, you know, obviously he trusted him enough to be the editor and thought highly enough, you know, for that job. So, of course, we can just only infer. Yeah, and so I, again, tried to find something about this conservatory. I found this letterhead, Palaschko's letterhead, and there's several letters you can see on the internet. But this was the letterhead, and it says he's the director of the conservatory, which began in 1880. This, again, confirms that he was the director. Here it says director of Bertischer, but this particular item is from an address book. And basically in the book, it goes house by house in Berlin, and it lists every person who's living in those spaces in that place. So this was for where Palaschko lived, which was number 24 Strausnick. Yeah. And Krausnick. And in this one, this is, I think, the one from 1914. They have several up until he died, up until you can see these, where, because he lived in the same place. But this is the only one slightly different than the others. It's because it says that he was a violin virtuoso and a pianist. In the other ones, it doesn't say that about him. So this is somewhat new and interesting to me. Right, and this was something from a music journal of the day, and it doesn't mention Palaschko directly, but the date of the event was 1929, so Palaschko was alive. And it says that they had a concert and that it was under the direction of the music director of Bertischer Conservatory. Excuse me. So, Die Musik is the music journal. And you can see all of these online, and I have a very long bibliography. If anybody really interested, I can send that to you. So these two items here are a write-up in two different music journals announcing the new publication by Palaschko. And they're both violin and piano pieces, and multiple movements. We see one even says elf dance, kind of has a lighthearted feel to it, or folk song in the other ones. Yeah, and he was 16 years old when he had these works published, and they were mentioned in these music journals. So I think that's quite an accomplishment for a young violinist. Right, the Musical Times and Singing Class Circular, that's what it used to be called back then, and now it's just called the Musical Times. Yeah, and Musicalish is just another music journal of the day. And all of these pieces are all of the published and unpublished works of Palaschko before he finished his education, up until 1899. So as you can see, even before finishing school, he's had quite a few successes. They must have been selling. Publishers are in it to make money. So for whatever reasons, they liked it, and he's quite a success even before finishing school. But that wasn't the only thing he was good at. He was actually an excellent violin player, according to one write-up in Signali. This is in 1898. And the article's basically not about him, but it's talking about a scholarship that the state sponsored. And somebody else won the primary scholarship. But then there was some extra money alongside, some extra money from some interest or some tax, and they gave that to Palaschko and another pianist, and as just like a little scholarship. So, and it says, he received a scholarship for violin playing, not really for composition. And then this last item is a very, very small mention in Signali the next year, that mentioned a recital that he did with a friend, a singer friend. And they said that it was an enjoyable and pleasant experience. So, all right. And so then at 1899, around the time that he played in the orchestra, he was basically finished school. And what to do, according to the Muller biography, he was on concert tours, or I would say freelance musician. I'm not sure exactly what that means in this historical context, but he didn't have an official appointment yet. But he was still composing music. And this was actually reviewed in Signali. And it's interesting because it starts out there. It's about Opus 26, 5 easy etudes, okay? And then the reviewer says, to whom the composer has no greater musical fame than an ambitious violinist, who are still in their midst of violin, and what they have left to ask for, which the piano for yourself additionally and happily supports. Being a good violinist has served him well for composition. So interesting. I mean, people of the day knew of his violin playing and his great ambition to be a violinist. These are some more reviews. This one says, given the lack of works for 3 violins, these character pieces should be all more welcome, since the Scherzo Orientale and Capriccio, apart from their pedagogical value, are particularly spicy and pleasant. I like that. When your etude can be spicy and pleasant, I think all is well. Then Altman, I'll go into him in a minute, writes another review about Opus 44, which is kind of a popular viola etude book, and basically mentions two of them that are very good. And but anyway, Dr. Wilhelm Altmann was a very famous musicologist of the day, and turned out to be a friend of Palaschko. Palaschko dedicated a viola book, Opus 44. Or no, sorry, another book to Altmann, because I guess they were friends. He says he's a friend in his dedication. But Altmann, in his day, like I said, was a musicologist. He was a critic. He wrote many things in different music periodicals of the day, and also wrote several books about chamber music. And you can check all those out. You can see all of them on IMSLP. Now, these are all of the works that Palaschko published before he got the job at the conservatory. So quite a few, and from different publishers, some German, some outside. So it can be implied, his music was selling everywhere. And this was all before he even had a job. It's quite a lot of notoriety and success. And at this time as well, before he got his first job, they were advertising his music. This is another viola etude book, Opus 49. And let me see. Yeah, and Altmann provides a very nice couple of sentences, and a lot of the reviewers often mention the double stops, that there's always a lot of double stops in Palaschko etudes. Right, and so then in 1914, he gets his first job. And I don't know how he got the job or what about that, but yeah, we do know he had that job. And he definitely had the job as the director. And I think at that time, from this point on, he composes the majority of his works, and is kind of the busiest time for his compositions, is during this period of time. So I couldn't find so much about his violin playing anymore after this point, but yeah. And this next item, it says Paul Klengel, Opus 46, is not a review of Palaschko, actually. It's a review of Paul Klengel's work called Three Romances. I think Paul Klengel wrote a violin and viola duo too. Very nice one. But anyway, in this review of Paul Klengel's work, the reviewer mentions the style of Johannes Palaschko, and mentions that as if it's a common thing that everyone knows back then is the style. And this is in 1914, so it's an interesting find. Yeah, this is an announcement of a concert. And this basically just says that there's going to be a concert at this place, and Palaschko's music is on the agenda and is in the advertisement. So this is in 1917. This one's from a few years later. This was an announcement of New Birth's concerts in Paris. And again, I have the original clipping, but I just wrote it out. But this one says that Palaschko's music was premiered in France that year. And New Birth was actually a friend to Palaschko. Not to how much, I'm not sure, but Opus 86, the viola etudes by Palaschko, are dedicated to New Birth. And New Birth was also a student of LaForge, and he was a very famous violist during his day, for sure. Yeah, these are the rest of Palaschko's works. He's got about 100 of them. And this was one that I uncovered in, I think, Die Musik, And this is Opus 59, which wasn't on any of the repertoire lists from Wikipedia or Petrucci. But this is like I says, children's symphony with the instrumentation. And there's an announcement you'll see later that talks about him playing this piece in public. So it's interesting. And actually, I did find, sorry, this children's symphony is located at the Slub Library as well, the original manuscript. So, right. So yeah, what you have been looking at is kind of the updated version of the piece. You know, the Wikipedia page didn't have a full version. The Muller didn't have a full version. No one really had a full. So I just kind of put everything together. And then I found these 6 missing ones that were in the Slub Library. And pieces for piano, pieces for orchestra, things that we didn't know anything about. So curious. Right, and right, yeah, these were some advertisements of the day. And this first one, this Concertmeister, you know, it doesn't say where it's for, you know, it just says, you know, it's state certified, you know, we have violin, viola, and they're going to teach the Palaschko method, which I think is interesting. And this next one is a similar advert, it's similar content, but again, it's a Palaschko method, just state certified method, which I think is fascinating. So. Yeah, more reviews. Yeah, more reviews. This is of Opus 92. Now, Opus 92 is in 2 volumes. There's, I would say, moderately easy etudes in there. They're all pretty short, and they're all with piano. And but you could play them by yourself too. They don't necessarily need the piano, but it's there for help. And the thing, you know, that I like and that he alludes to in this review, you know, is that Palaschko comes up with his own material, you know, and not everyone's a hit, you know, but some of them are quite clever and pleasant to listen to. He has a certain way of making the phrase, and it's, yeah, you can hear his little voice in these pieces, and they're fun to play. Yeah. This is a radio announcement from the day, and this just says that Palaschko's music is going to be on the radio at 1650, and yeah, it's coming in. And I found a few of this, and actually the piece that he's playing is called Witch's Dance, and it's hard to find. I don't think you can find the sheet music to purchase, or if you can, let me know. But back then, it was quite popular and was performed multiple times on the radio. They mentioned it. And yeah, this is another review kind of later. We're up to 1930 now. And this is of Opus 92, which was just the etude book that I was talking to you about. Let me see if there's, oh, right. Yeah, I like this one. If a violinist has the urge to overlook the violin for the viola, he will find the most convincing material in these poisonous and finely feasible studies to make him feel at home in viola playing. It is a shame that a master like Palaschko, who wrote so valuable and thankful material for the violin, is played so little in public. With this opus, quite a few viola players would like to make up for what the violinists have been missing. I like that one. I like it. And this is what I mentioned to you earlier, this last one. This is an announcement of him playing the Children's Symphony with Reinecke, Karl Reinecke, the Swiss composer. Right. Yes. And so not all reviews can be good ones. And this one is the longest of all of them. And actually, within this review, and this was in the Musical Times, um, he's reviewing two people, Godebsky and Palaschko. And basically, I won't read it to you. I'll just tell you the gist of it. It says that between the two of them, Palaschko gets closer to writing good music for the youth. This is for children, these pieces. They're like, yeah, just easier pieces. And it says that Palaschko gets better, is better, gets closer to it. But then he basically says that it's kind of outdated, and that the music itself is mediocre, and that the great classics have given us all the music we need for training and amusement. So there's no need for Palaschko's, basically. And to put the student deliberately in touch with mediocrity or the commonplace is tantamount to a negation of the very foundations of a sound education. It's intense. But at the end, he says, in Palaschko's pieces, there are even glimpses of originality. Not to be sure, very startling, but ingenious enough. So, not all reviews can be stellar reviews. Right. And then kind of my last item is a letter between his publisher at the time. And there's several letters like this. And I've uncovered, not only from Palaschko, there are other composers as well, old letters written to different publishers. And these publishers, they put them online, but they haven't translated them. And this was not translated. And they would even be willing to give you credit to translate these letters, and so there's a lot of letters out there, not only by Palaschko, but other composers too. So when I looked at this, I thought it was beautifully written, but then I couldn't understand a single thing of it. And then I started looking, into the way they wrote, this style. And, I think it would take a lot for me to learn it. So I basically have an ex-student who now lives in Germany. And so I actually had him translate this for me, because this old style of writing, I couldn't figure out. I tried, I really did. Okay, it's nothing too serious in this, but I'll read it to you anyway. I think it's cute. Dear sir, just shortly before the beginning of my summer trip, I received your friendly message. I thank you very much for your deliberate notification, as well as the 2 authored copies of my Opus 66, and allow myself the following humble requests. In the coming year, I will go on a longer trip that will lead me to France and England. In this occasion, with my foreign strangers and colleagues, I would like to have something published, or at your publishing house, which will be a violin and viola work. So may I ask you politely to publish Novastan at the spring of 1928, and to send me the printed corrections of these works in advance. So anyway, basically just kind of like a work email from the day, but I love to see if I could look at some of these other letters and find more interesting things. So yes, to the conclusion of it all. And so let me get out of this and kind of come back to you, So what can we say, in conclusion about Palaschko? What I could say is that he was a successful publisher of his music. He found his niche his thing in music, and he capitalized on it. He made it his whole life were student pieces. Palaschko will forever be known as a teacher in my mind, someone who worked his whole life to provide new material. Um, so, did I find, anything salacious about Palaschko's life? No. Was Palaschko as successful as Hindemith or another contemporary? No. When I started all this by looking in German magazines, German newspapers, to find a lot about Hindemith, very famous in those magazines. But was Palaschko to that level? No. I think we can say safely no. But he still existed, and he still contributes to life today, musical life today. They're selling his music, making websites, and why? Because his music is good. It rings with people, and that's timeless. It doesn't matter how successful or famous you are. In that moment of receiving that music, that person. So I think it is worth it. I think it is worth it to take the time to look back into the past and look at some of these obscure people and see what we can uncover, see what we can glean out of it, see if we can find something special, And that's what I tried to do in all of this. See what I could find, and did it change much about what I knew? No, it didn't change much, but it did add a lot of color. Seeing what other people thought, his contemporaries, it made me smile, and I got excited to think, wow, people today, they don't know anything about Palaschko. And why would they? Only violists really know. We're the only ones that are playing his music mostly. But anyway, I think it was well worth the journey, and to investigate an obscure musician, a forgotten one, one that was maybe famous during life and then fades away after. I think it is important to keep talking about them, and gave me kind of a snapshot into what that universe was like in Berlin, what it was like to be a classical musician at that time. And and it surprised me, and to think, Palaschko was around during World War One. Of course, at that time, there was no publications, nothing come from him during those times, for obvious reasons. And then living after World War One, and how hard it was for everyone. And, and then living up to almost World War Two, not quite. And who knows what impact that had. You would never know it from his music. His music is lighthearted. It has character. It has these little interesting moments that make you go, I like that. It's kind of interesting. Well, that's basically all I have on Palaschko. I have my colleagues here. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but it's okay if you don't. But anyway, for those who are listening, feel free to message me about this. If you have some question, I'm on Facebook. I have an email. If you know something I don't, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. So, well, again, that's about all I have, and I'd like to thank you so much for listening to me, and happy time studying your viola etudes in the future. All right. Thank you so much. Bye bye.